Hey guys, how you doing? This is JP Saricolia coming to you once again with another episode of Age of Heroes, my podcast. And in today's episode, as you can see on the title, I want to answer this question. Is The Lord of the Rings racist? Was the book racist, the collection of books? Was Tolkien, the creator of the books, a racist man? It seems that the question has been asked online. I've seen a lot of articles pointing this out and trying to justify their beliefs. So I want to really answer that because this is an important part of our lives. Tolkien's work was really important in really creating a fantasy world that actually was in the inspiration for so many stories out there, so many movie franchises, video games, books, novels, a lot of things have been inspired, and a lot of people that I know, a lot of our friends, a lot of artists have been inspired on his creation. So we want to get to the bottom of it, and we are going to do that in this video. But before we get into it, I want to thank those that support me, those that follow me here on YouTube, that watch the video, that subscribe to the channel, that like the videos and leave comments. Thank you very much for your support. If you're listening to the podcast through iTunes, Teacher, and Spreaker, thank you if you're sharing this, for listening, first of all, but also for sharing that through social media. I also want to thank those that follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are down below if you're interested in following me there. And also, I want to thank those that support me financially. It's through your financial support that I'm able to continue with this vision and to come to you every week and every day. So thank you very much. So now let's get into it because I'm a bit heated about this because I went online, of course, like every person. I go online, I read stuff on social media, and I found this article that tried to say, of course, was saying that Tolkien was racist and The Lord of the Rings has a lot of dark, in this case, racist connotations. And it went on, I'm a type of person, I'm a firm believer that I'm not going to refute something until the proof is given. So I'm a type of person that have to go into the material, read the article to see what it was. And all I found in this pretty much, website, which is technically just, one of those websites that is click and bait and, all it does is that. And the article was, it was poorly written and it really didn't give any proper information or any factual information. It just took, a lot of stuff out of context from some things that took from here and there, put it all together, trying to justify the idea, saying that Tolkien was racist and his remarks or whatever he said. But a lot of the stuff was out of context, completely out of context. And ultimately, the conclusion was really poorly written. And I found everything completely out of touch from someone that probably is based this on his perception of the films and not necessarily from the books, a person that probably has never read the books. And it was really sad to read, but I read it because I'm the type of person that I like to give a fair chance. I'm not the type of person that I'm going to jump into the hate wagon and saying you're wrong. Because at the end of the day, we are learning something. Maybe you can show me something of value. But going through all that article, I realized how wrong the article was, how wrong this person was. And definitely that made me a bit heated in the sense that I feel that, people can think that like that. Everybody has an opinion. And sometimes this websites allow a lot of writers to write from their heart, which definitely really speaks volumes of the quality of this website. Maybe just, it's controlled by a person or two. Because, looking through all of it, reading through all of it, I felt that, there was no proofreader and there was no editor for this. And, they just let it go. And, of course, they post it online and just clickbait and people just link to it and they just click to it and they get into it. And, of course, he starts a conversation and he brings more people so they can sell more ads. And you know how it is. It definitely is disappointing, the quality of writing and that we have nowadays. And I feel that that's something that social media and on the web has pretty much, although there are great sources of information, also there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of things are completely off track and bias. And definitely this article was one of them. Now I want to get back to the beginning. So we need to know who is Tolkien and who Tolkien was and what he represents for a lot of us. Of course, in this case, J.R.R Tolkien, John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, that's his full name. was an English writer, born in 1892. He passed away. He died in 1973. But he was a man that really defined a generation. He was a close friend to C.S. Lewis. They were both good friends. They both were professors at Oxford. And but even though they were good friends, and C.S. Lewis was the creator of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and of course all the Narnia books. And they, even though they were close friends, they have differences in opinion in regards to theology, apologetics, which is actually the theory of religion, very much of faith. In this case, doctrine, Christian doctrine, and the quality, of course, even of the Narnia books. Because in this case, Tolkien was not a big fan of allegorical, representation, allegories in his books. He was a person that preferred for the stories not to kind of hit you in the head with Christian faith or with, things of spiritual nature. He created the word, and this is the greatest thing about his books, in this case about The Lord of the Rings, is that even though there's a lot of imagery or images that represent some things of the faith, it's not a religious book. It's a book of an adventure, a world that he created, that he developed, that it's completely can be written by people that have the Christian faith, and they can see it. They can see the pretty much the good versus evil, and also you can see the people that are not Christians or non-believers. They can also read it without feeling like they're going to Sunday school. That's one of the greatest aspects of this book, because at the end of the day, it explores the nature of man, and his book is full of eschatological hope. Eschatological means in regards to the future, in regards to the end times. In the end of the day, you see, there's a lot of hope in his books, because at the end of the day, his belief, and what he really expressed in that no matter how bad things get, good always triumphs over evil. And I think that's something that all as humans, we want to, and we, aspire to, that good always is, it's stronger than evil. Even though there's a lot of evil in the world, and sometimes the evil might be overwhelming, in the end, good deeds, good need, the good things are going to triumph. And that's one of the greatest aspects of his literature that really brought that into it modern times. It really touched the fantasy, and that's the reason why he's considered the father of modern fantasy books. And of course, many books have been created after him. Even C.S. Lewis was inspired on his work. And, not only, so many books, so many stories out there that really have taken inspiration. Even comic book, even darker comic books have taken inspiration, like Hellboy, have taken inspiration from some of this stuff. Because he not only created a universe, a world, he also took inspiration from Celtic and Norse mythology, but it didn't really make it so heavily, because he developed a world, developed a language around it, and things that he make it so deep and profound that up to this day, of course, it has really growth. And of course, a lot of people throughout the world have come to know more about Tolkien's work through the trilogy, through the movies, through The Lord of the Rings, which are phenomenal films. They're not to the scope, I would say, of the book. Of course, the book is always better, but the work that Peter Jackson did with that trilogy was phenomenal. Now, many assumptions have been said because of comments that he said. The person in this article, and to my surprise, I went online and I went through different sites to see if there was the only person saying this. And I was surprised to find that there were so many different websites claiming the same thing. A lot of accusations in recent years. And we know there's a movie, Tolkien's and the life biography of Tolkien's coming out later this year in the middle of, I think around May, which I'm interested in watching, because definitely I like his story. If you read the life of Tolkien, you're going to find out that he was an enigmatic man. I can identify myself with Tolkien. Because he was a man that has conservative values like I do. But at the same time, he was very libertarian in his way of seeing the world. He was against, this is going back to his biography and what he always stand. Although he loved his country, he was not a firm believer of the monarchy. He thought that the monarchy was an ill for England and for the world. He has a more open view of things. He was independent in his views. He has sometimes ways to express himself that might come across a bit, for some people, strange, but he was separate. He was a maverick, a thinker, and that's something that he always did. Because, like, for example, with the books, there's many people would assume that there's a lot of allegorical views and perception in his books. But he denies it. He said that there's none of that. He created the world not thinking about trying to imply or apply to his own beliefs, but to try to create a world that was different and separated from everything that everybody could understand. So he was different. He was even, through his fans, he was different. His thought was different. Other people saw him in a different perspective, but he wasn't like that. He was a strong, Roman Catholic man. And even he was very important in C.S. Lewis' conversion to Christianity. C.S. Lewis grew up in church. He walked away from church. He became an atheist and ultimately came back because of his friend. But C.S. Lewis went into the Protestant faith. He became Anglican. So even though they were friends, they got differences of opinion in religion and theology, doctrine. So all of those things were different. He was a man that was different in many ways. One of the most important parts, if you read his history, is that even though he was in the First World War, he was pretty much a captain. And he lost a lot of people there. And that marked his life in a way that he hated war. He hated war. When World War II came about, and of course before World War II, he was already writing books. And his books were becoming popular. And a lot of people, even his German publishers, came to him and said, well, we want to publish this. But, they even asked him, during that time, of course, this is the time of the rise of the Führer and the rise of the German party in Germany. The Nazi party. And of course, he was even asked if he was a Jew. He was always a big defender of the Jewish people. Although some other people might assume that he sent some comments here and there, and they used some comments where he said that he compared Jewish people with pretty much with the dwarfs. But that was a comparison that was taken out of context. That's the part where people always take things out of context. He didn't do that. But he always had a great things to say about Jewish people. He was against the war. And even when a lot of people in England during that time were saying, and they were publishing a lot of stuff, really negative stuff against, in this case, German people, saying that we should annihilate or kill the entire German population, he was appalled to it. And he spoke about it. He says that doing that, it would be kind of falling into the same trap of the Nazi ideology, that one is superior than the other, and he was against that. He was against the mistreatment of pretty much prisoners of war. He was very outspoken when the atomic bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He was very outspoken about it and thought that was the worst thing could ever happen. He was, throughout the war, the Second War, he was very outspoken at what the concept of all-out war, which the Allies were doing, where technically what they were doing, they were pretty much bombarding, destroying a lot of civil populations, a lot of places where a lot of civilians, and he was against that because he said that was not the case. We're not fighting the Germans, we are fighting the Nazi ideology, the Nazis that have taken over this country. So he was a maverick thinker that thought differently in many different ways. He has points of views in regards to politics as well. He was a man that expressed that. Now, of course, this articles are pointing out things that he did that of course there's differences between black and white, between color and this, making that he was making some type of allegories in regards to race. So there's a lot of stuff that is just pretty much hogwash. It's all it is. Because honestly, I was just appalled to see that people don't understand this. Now, I'm not coming here to say that there's no racism in the world. And I don't like to get into this political things, but I think it's important to point out, at least for safekeeping of the work that we do. There is racism in the world. I'm not denying it. I've been part of it. Discrimination based on race, on ethnicity, is part of our lives. It happens everywhere. Not only here in the U.S., it happens in pretty much in all over Latin America. It happens all over Europe, all over Africa, all over Asia, all over any part of the world. It happens everywhere. And we are discriminated. People are discriminated based on their race, based on their ethnicity. We all part of that. But we have to understand that racism comes in many different forms. And sometimes we assume that, racism is just one thing happening here or there. And we assume, well, I'm not racist because I like all people. But the truth of the matter is that racism, and in this case, the discrimination is part of our lives. Sometimes it's in us without even noticing. You have to consider that there's many type of racism. You have aversive racism, which is subtle racism, or unconscious racial discrimination, which means is that this is the most common one. The aversive racism is the one that we all participate of. And this is the one that happens when we are racist without even noticing. Sometimes we discriminate people. We profile people based on what our assumptions are about these people. Whether they're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, we make assumptions of people and we discriminate people. We profile them based on factors that we understand or we think we understand. And of course, there's also color, color blindness, which is a very common thing nowadays. Color blindness is another form of racism. And this is when people say, well, there is no they disregard. They say, well, there's no such thing as affirmative action, or they say, well, there's no racism in the world. They say that, the world has changed. Everybody, I'm not racist. Nobody's racist. Everything is clear. And this is a mentality a lot of people have nowadays. And you can see online where people say, wow, they try to diminish the weight of racism in America and in the entire world. They're trying to say that people are not racist. And by doing so, by pretty much turning the eye and not really looking at the problems that are there, then they are being racist. And that's something that it happens a lot. That's, what it does, it perpetuates, racial discrimination. But, and throughout, pretty much that, and racial inequality throughout the world. But you also have cultural and xenophobia, which is the most common one, the one most open, and the one that people consider the most, was when people are very openly, they discriminate people based on their race very openly. And that's the one that is the most dangerous. It is most dangerous visually because it's the one that visualized, but it's not necessarily the only one. There's plenty others. But there's also economic racism, institutional racism, that is something that technically doesn't exist in the government anymore, but it exists in private entities all over the country, and all over the world, where you can see many jobs, because they're private entities, they still have a harder time for, even though they say they don't, you don't see people, in this case minorities, in high power. You only see, in this case, white people, in this case. But it happens everywhere. You got othering, racial discrimination, racial segregation. You got supremacism, symbolic racism, subconscious biases, which is very common. And these things are there. Now, I don't want to bring this up into the race issue here, because that's not the point. It definitely is important to determine this. Yeah, we are racist in one way or another. We do it subconsciously. We do it without even noticing. It is important to accept that. It's important to accept that, yes, we do certain things. Just because we make some differences or we do it subconsciously doesn't mean that we are xenophobic. Doesn't mean that we do it purposely. Doesn't mean that we hate people, and that's our goal in life, is to hate people because we feel superior to them. But we do it. We do it one way or another. We do it because of something that is engraved in us, whether it's from our childhood, from our upbringing, from the culture we live in, for the part of the world we are. We do it. It's not necessarily something between whites and blacks, or, it also happens between Hispanics and blacks. It happens between Asians. It happens even between, different people of the same nations, or happen between people of the same continents and the same actually color. Some people are racist towards other people based on their beliefs. Some people, just not every white person is racist towards, black people. Some white people are racist toward other white people, particularly in countries where there's differences of religion, because not all white people are the same. They don't come all from the same place. We tend in this country in the US, we tend to put people in categories. We say you're white, you're black, but a white person can be a white person from Northern Europe, can be a white person from the Mediterranean, can be a white Muslim from some parts of Europe where our people are Muslim, or you can be a white person from the Iberian part of the country, which is Spain, Portugal, or you can be from the islands, from Ireland, so there's so many differences. The same with Hispanics, there are Mexicans, there are people from the Caribbean, people from South America, Central America. We're all different. We might look the same to some, but there are clear differences. And the same happens with Africa. There's Northern Africans, there's Central Africans, there's, pretty much Southern Africans. And in Asia, the Chinese people are not the same as people from Malaysia and Vietnam, or, or Singapore, or people from Japan. There are clear differences. But people tend to, we tend to separate people and segregate people based on our own concepts. And we all are victims of it in one way or another. Now, do I consider The Lord of the Rings a racist book? Not by a long mile. I wouldn't consider it. It is a book full of literature and richness that definitely speaks of the times. And of course, you have to understand the context of the stories. Some things in our perception might come across as that, but there's a lot of other points within those stories that actually contradict our own beliefs. So the problem we have nowadays is this assumption that we have of things based on our own personal bias and our own personal experience. I feel that people that are hurt the most about race are the ones that are going to hurt others in regards to race. And we need to stop that because it is not conducive for growth. Throwing this to the through social media is perpetuating something that shouldn't be there. We need to understand, first of all, we need to accept that they are racial bias, that we are all part of it, that we are victims too of it, but also we are the cause of it. Accepting it's important. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to find the guilty place or find this is the problem, this is what caused it, I don't think The Lord of the Rings caused the racism in the world. We have caused that. Our forefathers did, but we have the power to change that. And I think that books like this are marvelous ways to introduce to children for them to really see the world with hope, because definitely the Lord of the Rings have a lot of hope, and it really showcases a lot of great things about the world in the sense, because it's a world that is really representative of our own world, full of pain and sorrow, but at the end of the day, there is hope, and, good always wins. Even going through many different trials, good will always win. And that's the central message of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all the books that he wrote. I think that's the hope that we need more than ever. We live in dark times, and sometimes that affects the way we perceive things and the way we act. I see sometimes racism even in groups and, Facebook groups and even in YouTube. I see people making some comments. The other day I was watching a video. Some collectors, they have this live chat. I normally don't participate in live chats because I don't want to get into boggle down into a lot of the conversation because some of these chats are long. So I kind of watch a couple of minutes and move on to the next thing. But what really surprised me is that a collector was talking to another collector, and they got into this conversation, and for something happened. I don't know what happened. This person make technically a racial remark about this other person, pretty much call him a supremacist just because of his look. And I can see the person got really hurt by the comment, even though it was kind of in a joke, but definitely that was a racial remark. And I found it very offensive, that person, I'm not white, but I found that this person got offended because the other person, say something just as a joke. That's not nice. To me, that's not right. If you are in social media, our job is to express that. We're talking about collectibles. We're bringing people together from different races, different nationalities. There's all colors there. Our job is not to discriminate people. Perhaps it was a response for something that the person did in the past. I don't know. But even if that's the case, I don't think it's right to continue the fight or to continue to bring in all these things here. I found that very disappointing from this live chat. And, the person that actually holds the live chat is not responsible for it. It's, the response of these two people, in this case, this person, the way he acted. If I was there, I can tell you one thing. If I was there, I would put a stop to it. I would say, this is not welcome here. We shouldn't talk like that anymore. Yes, it is live and things come and doing that, but there has to be a level of respect. But the thing is this is not only pretty much a, single case. It happens everywhere. It happens on Facebook groups. It happens in a lot of places, even Instagram, even on Instagram and Twitter. It happens in Twitter. It happens a lot. So we have to be very, very careful to point the finger at people. Because when you point the finger at someone, before you point a finger to someone, you should point the finger at you. And trying to determine what is in your life that really is the cause of the problem. We are the cause. We create the cause. The Lord of the Rings is a phenomenal book. There's nothing racist about the book. And you know what? He lived in a time, Tolkien lived in a time where there was a totally different thing. We need to understand the context of his time. But he never applied that. Historically, there's a lot of places, there's a lot of facts, there's a lot of information out there, factual information that proves that he was a man that has beliefs, strong beliefs in regards of race, in regards to equality, in regards to respecting people, and even loving your enemies. And he did that. He was really open about that. He was he accused the U.S., he accused even England for allowing the tactics that were used against Japan and even Germany, and how many people suffer the consequences of this. He was a man that was a defender of those things, and a man that believed, and he wrote a beautiful story, a beautiful book that will be remembered forever. So I want to leave you with that. Before we get into any more of this, I don't like to bring race into it, but it's important to talk about it because we all part of it. We all have a race, and we all have some bias, and our bias, it is influenced the way we act and the way we do certain things online, and we need to get over it. So once again, thanks for watching this. If you're doing this through YouTube, thanks for listening through the iTunes, Teacher, and Spreaker. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching this. Follow me on the social media networks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Please share the podcast with your friends. Also consider supporting me financially. You can do that through Patreon. You can also do that through PayPal, or you can do that through GoFundMe. All the links are down below. So once again, God bless you, and I'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.